Hello and welcome. I'm Seth Boustead, and I'm excited to be giving the talk for the second concert of the Grant Park Music Festival's 2021 season. This is kind of an extroverted concert, a bit of an emotional roller coaster in some respects. It's all over the map, so to speak. We open up with a work by Julia Perry called Short Piece for Orchestra that, for me at least, is a kind of taut, high-wire act of an orchestral work, kind of edge of your seat, even a thriller, really, in some respects. And then we go to Georges Bizet. We go to the south of France, the Provence region. It's beautiful music from Georges Bizet from the 19th century. And then we stay in the 19th century, but over into the romantic piano concerto tradition, heart firmly on the sleeve now, emotions hanging out everywhere, the Edvard Grieg Piano Concerto. And then I guess we put on our cowboy hat and kind of ride off into the sunset with the William Tell Overture by Rossini. Of course, Rossini wasn't thinking of it as cowboy music, but, well, after The Lone Ranger, that's kind of the association that we all have with it. I say that the Julia Perry is a kind of high-wire act. What do I mean by that? Well, I think part of it is just when the piece was composed, what was around in the musical ether at that time. And I think part of it is her own dramatic abilities. Perry wrote 3 operas. She wrote a lot of music for the theater. She certainly had a fine sense of drama. The work was written in 1952, which is right smack dab in the middle of the modernist movement. And Perry is this fascinating figure because she got her start writing vocal music mostly. She was inspired by African-American spirituals, but then she studied with a guy named Luigi Dalla Piccola, one of the arch proponents of modernism. She studied with him at Tanglewood, liked it so much, she went back to Europe to study with him in Italy, and then she studied with Nadia Boulanger in France and would stay in Europe, which is really kind of the hotbed of modernism. I mean, it was happening in the United States as well, but she stayed there for 10 years before coming back to the States, soaking in all of these influences. So this piece is a kind of mix of both, I think, her own dramatic tendencies couched within the modernist idiom, so to speak. Modernists were very interested in angular melodies, dissonant harmonies. We'll definitely hear that in this piece. They liked nondescript titles like Short Piece for Orchestra. They didn't think that music should necessarily be descriptive or relate to other things. It should exist for its own sake. They also were very interested in counterpoint, which we'll hear in this piece. But there's also usually a kind of cold, cerebral aspect to modernist music, which we will not hear in this work. I think of this actually like the sonic equivalent to watching a Hitchcock film in some respects, especially the opening. She just plunges us right in without any kind of introduction to her sound world, much the way that, say, Hitchcock does in North by Northwest, for example. The action just starts. Let's hear a little bit of the opening of Julia Perry's Short Piece for Orchestra. That's a little bit of the opening of Short Piece for Orchestra by Julia Perry. I hope you can hear what I mean. We just plunge right in. Even when the piece is in a slower part, there's this sense that you're on the edge of your seat. There's this sense that something's coming around the corner. You're not totally sure if you want to know what it is exactly. Again, like Hitchcock, she's a master of suspense. There's a sense that when things are slowing down, it's actually the eye of the storm and there's more to come. And indeed, the piece ends with the big finish. So that will open the program. And then we go a totally different direction to the Georges Bizet, the 19th century now, moving away from the middle of the 20th century, going towards the end of the 19th century. Although Bizet is really kind of his own composer in so many respects, as so many French composers really didn't pay much attention to what was happening in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. Bizet is really in that model. So in 1872, he was asked to write music for a play. And this was very common at that time in the 19th century to have music as part of plays. You would have an overture or a prelude at the very beginning before the action starts, before the curtain opens. You would have what are called entr'actes, a piece of music in between the different acts. And so Bizet was asked to contribute music to this play, The Girl from Arles, or the Arlésienne. It was a flop, unfortunately, but Bizet knew he had written good music, and so he extracted several pieces and created this suite. It's in 4 movements, and I want to focus on the first movement. The second, third, and fourth are fantastic. The second is a minuet, and it is quite danceable, unlike some classical music dances. This is a very danceable dance movement. And then there's this wonderful slow adagietto, very beautiful music from Bizet, reminiscent in some respects of the opera Carmen. And then we go back into high gear for the fourth movement. But I'm focusing on the first just because it's somewhat unusual. It is a prelude, what we would hear at the beginning of the play, but it's unusual. Normally there's some pomp. Normally there's a sense of setting the scene, a sense that there's more to come, and that is kind of present. There's certainly pomp in the opening, but Bizet has chosen to use a folk tune called March of the Kings, which is kind of unusual. It's not his own music. It's another theme, and then he launches into variations on that for a couple of minutes, which is just kind of an unusual way to handle this. And then everything kind of slows down. We get this beautiful accompaniment pattern in the strings, and then we have a saxophone solo. The saxophone is still pretty unusual in the orchestra at this time. It's supposed to represent the brother of the hero. Now, I don't know the play because it was a flop. It's not still around. But I have to guess that the brother of the hero was a pretty good guy too, because Bizet gives him some very beautiful music. And then finally, the piece starts to act like an actual prelude. So let's listen to some of this. Let's start with towards the end of the March of the Kings, into that accompaniment pattern, and then this beautiful saxophone solo. Okay, as part of the prelude from Georges Bizet, Suite from L'Arlésienne. It's the first suite. There are 2. And again, it's beautiful music. I want to just kind of focus on that aspect of it because it's unusual. It's almost like there are 3 separate pieces mashed together in this prelude. And structure-wise, instrumentation-wise, the other 3 movements are a little more traditional, though they're very, very Bizet-esque. There's always a kind of lilt to his music, a dance-like quality. And for my money, at least, Arles is in the south of France, about an hour south along the Rhone River from Avignon. And I feel like I'm smelling French food. I'm hearing the ocean. There's this sense of the south of France in this music, as there should be. The Grieg is one of the most performed piano concertos out there in the world. It is kind of a warhorse in some respects, but it is a piece that absolutely stands repeated listenings. There's so much going on in this work in many respects. Grieg himself was a very talented young musician. He was born in Oslo, and his parents, as so many parents of talented kids all throughout history, have said, what are we going to do with this kid? Where are we going to send him? He needs to go to a conservatory. We can't help him here. But there were no conservatories in Oslo, so they sent him to Leipzig to study at the Leipzig Conservatory. And at the Leipzig Conservatory, he heard Clara Schumann perform Robert Schumann's Piano Concerto in A minor. And this was an enormous experience for the young Grieg. And so he wanted to write a piano concerto. In many respects, he did model it after the Schumann Concerto, but he puts a lot of his own elements into it as well. Now, what is a concerto? A concerto is a showpiece for a soloist, in this case, a piano soloist. Our soloist tonight is Joyce Yang, and I had a wonderful opportunity to catch up with her in cyberspace and talk with her about performing this piece from her perspective.
I love the Grieg Concerto because of its extreme lyricism. There are so many beautiful moments all throughout the piece. And I've never been to Norway, but I imagine this pristine nature sounds, and there's such stillness in the slow movement that it's almost like the time stops in that movement, only to be to change completely with the beginning of the third movement, which is actually always very shocking as a performer, going from that pristine and very quiet, still moment, and you have to break the silence in the most dramatic way. And that's that arpeggio going up is always very challenging for a number of reasons. And I really enjoy getting to that final big bravura moment where the melody comes back, and it really you reach the Mount Everest moment at that time, and brings us to a very, very high celebratory point at the end of the piece. So it's just a wonderful roller coaster in a way throughout, and so many beautiful melodies I'm looking forward to. I think the orchestra and the soloist really takes turns taking that lyricism to different places. And I feel like I'm interacting with sort of soloistic voices in the orchestra. And there are moments where I have to really lead, because it's like I am sort of the protagonist in that scene, and everything around me would be the sound coming from the orchestra. So I think sometimes the orchestra plays that accompanimental role sort of texture-wise and color-wise. I think of music in very much visually. So I feel that the orchestra sometimes represents the nature surrounding that main character. It's going to be an intense couple of days. I will arrive in Chicago just a couple of nights before the concert. And the day before the concert, there is one rehearsal, and the dress rehearsal the day of the concert. And the day before, I will be working with some young pianists in the area and giving a masterclass. So that's how I'll be spending the afternoon when I'm not practicing. So it's going to be fun-filled and very fast-paced a couple of days. I've never played with a maestro, Carlos Kalmar, and I really look forward to it. And it'll be my first time in Grant Park, and I can't wait to be outside making music with other musicians, and it'll be so exciting to see so many people in the audience.
That's Joyce Yang talking about performing the Edvard Grieg Concerto. She will be the soloist in the performance with the Grant Park Music Festival. I was talking about influences in the Grieg, how he's very influenced by Norwegian folk music, and somehow manages the impossible to create this feel of a village, small Norwegian village influenced by the folk music, but then nested within these large-scale piano concerto forms, he only wrote one concerto. It's absolutely incredible. Let's hear some of this. So I want to start with the Hardanger fiddle, which is an important folk instrument in Norway. Let's hear a little bit of the Hardanger fiddle, and then hear how this influences very subtly the piano part in the first movement. Okay, it's a little bit of the influence here, very, very subtle in the Grieg. Let's turn to the second movement now. Grieg goes from the key of A minor to the distant key of D flat major. It's very common in a piano concerto in the Romantic era, in the Classical era, for the second movement to be a slow movement, for it to be lyrical. Starting with Beethoven, some late Mozart, it starts to become kind of sorrowful, more emotional. In the Schumann, it's very emotional. And in the Grieg, he even goes further with it. I'm going to start it right where the piano comes in. Okay, some of the beautiful second movement by Grieg. This beautiful melody, very sorrowful though. This is a young composer who seems beyond his years writing in this second movement of the concerto. Now, in the third movement, the Norwegian folk influences are very, very present. He's actually doing a hammer, or a Norwegian dance. So again, let's put those side by side. So I'm going to play a little bit of the hammer, and then we'll hear what Grieg does with it, taking this village dance and blowing it up into the romantic form. Pretty fascinating, isn't it? Music by Grieg from the third movement of the concerto. Everything is here, like I said, heart on your sleeve, emotionality, following in the footsteps of Schumann in so many respects, and yet still being true to his Norwegian roots as well. It's a fascinating synthesis, a wonderful piece, well deserves its place as one of the most performed concertos in the world, and I know Joyce Yang is going to play the heck out of it. The concert will conclude with a very famous piece, again, thanks to the Lone Ranger, by Rossini, the William Tell Overture. And I think that piece speaks for itself, so I won't give much background on it. It is one of the few pieces, I think Rossini kind of knew that a lot of his music wouldn't outlive him. And someone asked him, what do you think will live? And he said, Barber of Seville, end to end, and probably parts of William Tell. Well, he was right. He couldn't possibly have known why, but it is a rollicking piece and a wonderful way to end a wonderful concert. Again, I'm Seth Boustead. Thanks so much for listening. I hope to see you at a future lecture.